Greetings and welcome to the First Lutheran Church Pastoral Vlog. This week we get another part two of our gospel from Matthew chapter 18, which we started from verse 15 last week, where Jesus says, if another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault. When the two of you are alone, if the member listens to you, you have regained that one. Now, if that sounds familiar, it is, because that was part of our gospel last week. But this week, the gospel continues, and Jesus has taught about what you do when someone sins against you in the church. You go to them, you bring people, you bring the church. And then Peter gets a little nervous about all of this talk and says, if another member of the church sins against me, how many times must I forgive them? You can tell that the power of Christ's forgiveness is very close. It is very close to Peter, and he's getting a little nervous. This is what we do with the gospel. We, right before we are freed by it, we think this sounds a little reckless. And so Peter offers to Jesus, maybe 7 times is enough. That seems probably fairly generous. And Jesus responds, no. He says, not 7 times, Peter, but 77, or some translations say 70 times 7. Either of those answers are more than you can count on your hand, which is to say more than you can keep track of. And Jesus is saying, no, when you are in the power of forgiveness, you will be freed to forgive others many, many, many times. You will become a producer of great forgiveness, or at least a distributor of great forgiveness. And then Jesus tells the story about the slave who is forgiven much debt and freed, yet has someone come to him with a little debt and does not forgive them, and Jesus comes down hard on this person. All of this is to say that the church, starting with Peter now, as we remember hearing from some weeks ago, is a place where the forgiveness of Christ is proclaimed. And not just once or twice, but many, many times. And this is good for you. It's good for me, because we are sinners, and sinners are forgetful of the freedom that Christ brings us. And so we are forgiven. You are forgiven. And then very shortly after that, we start to look for other ways that we can accumulate our righteousness and keep it to ourselves, only to come to church again and be forgiven. This is the rhythm of faith for a sinner like you and me. But when you're in the church, you're in the right place for this, where the forgiveness of sins can be given many, many times, not just 7. That seems like a lot when you're the one giving the forgiveness, but when you're the one receiving it, well, 70 times 7, that sounds better. As many times as Christ sees fit to forgive you. This is how much forgiveness there is. And now when you come to church, you will be freed in this forgiveness. Your sins will be taken from you, and you will be indeed freed to forgive others, not as a requirement, but as a joy. So come to worship. We'll see you this Saturday and Sunday, where the forgiveness of sins will be preached many times for your sake on account of Christ. See you in worship.